I screamed at 6:17 in the morning, barefoot in pajamas running down my driveway as the HOA president Victoria Peaton swung a crowbar straight into my visitor truck. Glass exploded everywhere, sunlight catching every shard like sparks, and for a second I actually thought I was still dreaming because no sane person just walks onto someone else's property and starts destroying a vehicle in broad daylight. But she did it again. Another swing, metal bending, paint tearing, and she yelled. About property values, like she was fixing a problem instead of committing a crime. Neighbors started opening their doors, phones came out recording everything, and right there in that moment I realized this was not just another petty HOA argument. This was something that had been building for years, finally snapping in the worst possible way, and the craziest part was, she had no idea whose truck she was destroying. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure you like and subscribe to Karen Stories Daily, because stories like this only get crazier and you do not want to miss how this one ends. Now let me take you back, because this moment did not come out of nowhere. This was 8 years of control, pressure, and quiet intimidation finally exploding. My name is Riley Castellanos, and about a year and a half ago I moved into what I thought was a peaceful suburban neighborhood called Willowbrook Estates. I had just gone through a rough divorce, lost a lot financially and emotionally, and I needed a fresh start somewhere quiet, somewhere stable, and on the surface this place looked perfect. Clean streets, friendly faces, reasonable HOA fees, everything you would expect from a normal neighborhood. But what I did not realize was that the entire place was basically controlled by one person. Victoria Peaton. Victoria was the kind of HOA president who treated rules like weapons. She was always watching, always ready to fine someone for something small, something that most people would ignore. And within my first 2 weeks living there, I got my first violation notice, a fine for my mailbox color, which made no sense because every mailbox on the street looked exactly the same when I called her. She spoke to me like I was the problem, like I was the one breaking rules that no one else had to follow, and that was my first introduction to how things worked around here. Over the next few months, I started noticing patterns. Certain people were targeted more than others, especially anyone who looked different or questioned her authority. Families like the Johnsons always seemed to have issues with garbage cans. Mrs. Chen got fined for her garden, while others did whatever they wanted without any problems, and it became clear that this was not about maintaining standards. This was about control and power. Then everything changed when I met Maria. She was smart, calm, confident, and worked in legal. Though she never went into details about what exactly she did, we started spending more time together, and naturally her truck became a regular sight in my driveway, and that is when Victoria really started focusing on me, because suddenly I was not just another resident, I was someone she wanted gone. The first move she made was introducing new parking rules limiting how long guest vehicles could stay, and it was obvious this was aimed directly at me because Maria had just started staying over more often, and almost immediately I started getting violation notices, fines, stacking up for things that had never been an issue before. And when I looked around the neighborhood, I saw plenty of other cars parked for longer periods without any consequences, which confirmed what I already suspected. This was selective enforcement. Instead of arguing, I started documenting everything, every car, every violation, every inconsistency, and what I found was worse than I expected. People connected to Victoria could break the rules without consequences, while others were targeted repeatedly. And when I filed an official complaint asking for records, something unexpected happened. I received documents that were never meant to be shared, internal emails where Victoria openly talked about targeting certain residents, including me, using language that made it clear this was not about rules, it was personal. That was the moment I realized this situation was bigger than I thought. This was not just harassment. This was something deeper, something systematic. And Maria, when she saw the documents, had a reaction that told me this was serious in a way I had not fully understood yet. From that point on, everything escalated. Victoria started issuing more violations, faster, more aggressive, like she was trying to overwhelm me financially and mentally, but every notice, every fine just added more evidence to what was already becoming a very clear pattern of abuse. I started digging deeper into HOA records, financial documents, vendor contracts, and what I found was shocking, inflated. Costs, payments to connected companies, and signs that money was being moved in ways that did not make sense. And the more I looked, the more it became clear this was not just mismanagement. This looked like organized corruption. At the same time, neighbors, who had been quiet, started opening up, sharing their own experiences, their own finds, their own stories, and suddenly it was not just me anymore, it was a whole group of people who had been dealing with the same thing for years, just never speaking. Victoria could feel it too, because her behavior became more unpredictable, more aggressive, like she was losing control and trying to grab it back any way she could. New rules, new fines, even attempts to send fake inspectors to my property to create violations that did not exist, but by then I was ready, documenting everything, questioning everything, and making sure nothing went unnoticed. Then came the moment that changed everything. The discovery that the HOA fees themselves might not even be legal. When I compared the current fees to the original limits set in the founding documents, the numbers did not match at all, and when I calculated the difference over years across hundreds of homes, the total was massive, millions of dollars that should never have been collected. That is when I called Maria and finally asked her directly what she actually did for a living, because at that point I knew this was not something I could handle alone, and what she told me in that moment changed everything I thought I knew about this situation and about her, because the truth was bigger than HOA drama, bigger than neighborhood disputes, and way bigger than anything Victoria had planned for. When I asked Maria what she really did, she paused for a second and then told me she was the district attorney and had already been investigating HOA fraud in this area for years, and Willowbrook Estates was one of her biggest cases. That was the moment everything made sense, all the questions, all the patterns. All the evidence I had been collecting was not just proof for me, it was part of something much bigger, and Victoria had no idea how deep this actually went. We decided not to reveal anything right away. Instead, we let her keep going, because every move she made only added more evidence, and that is exactly what led to that morning when she completely lost control and started smashing the truck, thinking it was just another way to intimidate me. But what she actually did was commit a serious crime in front of cameras, witnesses, and clear proof. The community reaction was immediate. People who had stayed silent for years could not ignore this anymore. Even her own supporters started backing away because there was no defending what she had done, and behind the scenes everything was already moving. Maria had everything she needed to take action. A few days later, a community meeting was called, and the room was packed, neighbors showing up not just to listen but to finally speak. And when the evidence was presented, everything came out: financial records, emails, violations, years of abuse, all laid out clearly for everyone to see. And then the video of her destroying the truck played and the entire room went silent. That was when Maria stepped forward and revealed who she was, and within moments Victoria went from being in control to being under arrest right there in front of everyone. No more power, no more authority, just consequences for everything she had done. The fines were removed, the system was reset, and the neighborhood finally felt normal again. People started talking to each other, supporting each other, and for the first time it actually felt like a community instead of a place controlled by fear. And the craziest part of all this is that it could have continued for years if no one had spoken up. If you made it this far, drop a comment and tell me what you think about this situation, and share this story with someone who needs to see it. And do not forget to subscribe to Karen Stories Daily for more stories like this.